The soldier begged, not with words. He couldn't speak anymore. His mouth was broken, bloodied. He just knelt, shoulders trembling, eyes swollen shut, trying to hold his ground like he still believed mercy existed in this war. But mercy had long since burned with the cities behind them. The boy holding the spear was maybe 17. He hesitated. Alexander didn't. From atop his dark stallion, he gave the smallest nod. The guard standing beside the boy stepped in, shoved the spear through the prisoner's chest with a brutal snap. The boy flinched. Blood splattered his face. He dropped the weapon and vomited. No one moved. Then came the voice. The soldier didn't have time to clean his hands. Alexander dismounted without a word. The crowd thought it was over until he turned, pointed to the boy and said, "Take the hand that hesitated." 2 guards stepped forward. The boy screamed this time, but only once. The second scream never came. His wrist hit the dirt before his knees did. You kill him for what? For hesitating, or for reminding you what it feels like to have a conscience? It was Hephaestion. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. Everyone heard him, even Alexander. The king turned. The dust curled around his cloak like smoke. His eyes met Hephaestion's, and for a split second the whole camp stood still, not from fear, from anticipation, because this was the moment something sacred broke. Hephaestion, known only in records as friend, companion, second to the king. But to those who actually watched from the shadows of tents and torchlight, he was something else. Something Alexander never named, and maybe couldn't. They had grown up side by side, trained together, bled together. Hephaestion had no throne, no crown, no ambition for glory. But he had Alexander's attention, raw and undivided. And in a world where kings held gods in their blood, that was power too dangerous to name. Alexander dismounted in silence, not a word, not a reprimand. He walked past Hephaestion, slow and cold, but everyone could see it. The clenched jaw, the twitch in his fingers, the way his boots crushed the sand just a little harder than usual. Something had fractured. That night, the camp was quieter than usual. Fires burned lower. Laughter stayed hidden in throats. And inside the king's tent, no music played. Alexander sat alone, sleeves rolled, tracing the edge of a bronze goblet with his thumb. Maps lay sprawled across the table, routes to India, plans for siege. But he wasn't reading them. His eyes were unfocused, lost somewhere far earlier in the day. Hephaestion entered without permission. They always did this. No guards, no ceremony. But tonight, it felt different, like stepping into a room you no longer belonged in. "You looked at me like I was your enemy," Hephaestion said. "You made me feel like one," Alexander replied. A silence hung between them, dense, unspeakable. The kind that cracks in places no voice can reach. "I spoke the truth," Hephaestion said softly. "Someone had to." Alexander's laugh was bitter. "I don't need truth, I need loyalty." "You had both, but you're starting to confuse one for the other." He stood there, waiting, hoping. But Alexander looked away, not in anger, in fear. Fear of what that man had just seen in him. By morning, something had changed. At the War Council, Hephaestion's name was missing from the logistics board. He wasn't summoned to review the siege supplies, and his tent had been quietly moved farther from the king's. No one spoke of it, but everyone noticed. This was not exile, not yet. It was something worse. It was the beginning of erasure. The punishment wasn't excel, it was precision. Clean, quiet, and sharp enough to kill without bleeding. They didn't exile him. They didn't strip his title or burn his banner. They just moved his tent farther from the king, farther from the map tables, closer to the latrines. No explanation, no one dared ask, but everyone understood what it meant. At the next council, he wasn't summoned. At the next feast, his name wasn't listed. He still showed up, still wore his armor, still saluted at every flag, but no one saluted back. The air around him grew colder than any battlefield. Then came the boy, a kitchen runner, 16 maybe, eager. All he said, softly, in the wrong place, in the wrong company, was, "He used to ride beside the king, didn't he?" They found him the next morning, face shattered, tongue gone, a bronze pin shoved through his lower jaw, nailing his mouth shut from inside. No one asked who ordered it, but they left the body near the olive barrels where everyone passed. And where Hephaestion had to walk by, he didn't stop, he didn't even blink, but his boots left bloody prints where he stepped. That night in the banquet hall, a noble lifted his cup. To those who know when to fade, and those who forget they were never meant to last. Laughter sharp, controlled, like clinking blades. Hephaestion smiled, not with amusement, with precision. He raised his own goblet, tapped it twice on the table, and drank. Later, in his tent, he sat in the dark for hours. No wine, no light. Just his armor, polished, untouched, sitting beside the knife under his cot. He didn't draw it, but he made sure it was clean. Endurance didn't mean strength. It meant staying quiet, while watching others bleed in your place. They didn't kill him, they killed his name, and then stood in silence while people forgot what it used to mean. The new campaign map was beautiful. Rivers etched in gold, cities in silver leaf, every conquest labeled, every border sealed. Except one, Hephaestion, gone, no stain, no smear, just absence. A wound so clean it pretended never to have bled. Hephaestion said nothing, until that evening when the scribe was dragged from the archives. The old man had worked in silence for 30 years. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a threat. All he had done was preserve old letters, some bearing Hephaestion's seal. They called it treason, forgery, fabrication, desecration of the king's history. No trial, no defense. They tied him to the central post and jammed a crumpled scroll into his mouth, one of the letters he had saved, then lit the corner. The flames climbed slowly. He didn't scream. Not until the skin on his arms peeled back like paper. Hephaestion didn't attend the execution, but he saw the smoke from his tent. He didn't speak of it, but he didn't sleep that night. The next morning, a marble bust of Hephaestion disappeared from the temple in Tyre. No notice, no explanation. The pedestal was scrubbed clean, the nameplate removed. The statue cracked, the priest said. The gods must have disapproved. A day later, one of the stonemasons who worked on the bust was found with both hands crushed by a mallet. The guards said it was an accident. The blood trail said otherwise. Hephaestion sat alone, surrounded by empty scrolls. He dipped his pen in ink, paused, then placed the pen back down. What was the point of writing? If the world had already chosen to forget the alphabet of your name, the scribe had burned. The statue was gone. The stonemason would never carve again. And Hephaestion, He was still alive, but the version of him that used to speak, to build, to believe, was already halfway dead. Now all that remained was the silence that buried him alive. It wasn't exile, it wasn't death, it was worse. It was being in the same room as history, and knowing you were no longer part of it. Hephaestion still woke before the sun, still buckled his armor, still stood at attention at morning roll call. No one told him to. No one acknowledged him either. He walked through camp like a statue left behind after a parade had moved on. They didn't salute. They didn't look. They just avoided, as if his very presence might get them killed. One evening, a soldier was dragged from the barracks. He had been found with an old campaign token, a silver medallion etched with Hephaestion's face. He said it was a gift, said he wore it for luck. They called it treason. They tied him to a post, upside down, legs spread, mouth gagged with his own tunic. Hephaestion watched from the shadows as they beat him with belts, then whips, then sticks until the sounds stopped. He didn't move, didn't interfere. He just stared at the blood soaking into the sand, and when they cut the body down, he turned away. That night, a guard came to his tent, whispered low, "People are starting to think you're cursed." Hephaestion didn't answer. He stared at the candle burning on the table until the wax collapsed on itself, then said quietly, "They're wrong. Curses end. I don't." At the next feast, a noble dropped a goblet at Hephaestion's feet. No apology, just a look. The kind that says you no longer exist. Hephaestion didn't pick it up. He didn't step over it either. He crushed it under his boot, let the shards stay on the carpet, and kept walking. No one laughed, no one spoke, and that silence. It was no longer awkward, it was ritual. He returned to his tent, sat on the cot, and pulled out the knife again, still sharp, still unused, still waiting. He didn't raise it to his throat. He raised it to the candle and stared at the reflection in the steel like it might remember what he used to be. The next morning, a message was scratched into the side of his tent. One word, ghost. Hephaestion didn't clean it. But when the torchbearer passed that night, he dragged the flame a little too close to the fabric. And when the word caught fire, he didn't flinch. The army kept marching. The king kept winning. But Hephaestion, he was no longer fading. He was calcifying, and somewhere between silence and obedience, something colder than rebellion began to grow. It didn't start with a speech. It started with a shipment, unmarked, unauthorized, but impossible to ignore. The western outposts were starving. Alexander had redirected supplies to the front. Strategy, he said. But Hephaestion knew what starvation looked like. He'd seen it in the way soldiers stopped singing and children stopped crying. So he signed an order. No seal, no clearance, just his name, his hand, his will. "Send 3 carts, he told the muleman. "No banners, no witnesses." The man saluted. He had once owed his life to Hephaestion at the gates of Tyre, and debts like that don't die quietly. 2 days later, the muleman came back. Sort of. They found him strung up at the eastern gate, upside down, his face blue, his body swollen, his mouth sewn shut with golden thread. A tag hung from his foot, written in blood. He fed the dead. Hephaestion stood beneath the corpse and read the message 3 times, then looked away. Not because he was afraid, because he wasn't surprised. At the supply depot that afternoon, a new decree was posted. All requisitions require double signature, authorized names only. He wasn't on the list. He didn't tear it down. He didn't argue. He burned it, with the same flame they used to light the Muleman's pyre. That night, a nobleman made a joke. The ghost thinks he can still command grain. Maybe next he'll try summoning wine. The next morning, the noble's horse was found with its throat cut, its body folded neatly beside a pile of ash. A coin, a campaign coin bearing Hephaestion's face, was stuck between the beast's ribs. No name, no witness, but everyone understood what it meant. Hephaestion didn't defend himself, didn't deny it either. When he entered the mess tent later that day, no one sat beside him, but no one mocked him again. "He's done waiting," someone whispered that night. "He's not rebelling, he's reminding them he never left." Alexander was told. Of course he was. He didn't call for Hephaestion, didn't summon him, didn't send guards, but he stopped sleeping in his own tent and tripled the guard outside the war chamber, because when ghosts return, they don't knock. He didn't knock, because ghosts don't knock. They just walk back in and make the living answer. No guards stopped him. No one dared speak. Hephaestion walked straight into the war tent, dust on his cloak, a dried cut across his lip, mud on his boots. Inside, Alexander, surrounded by generals, scribes, maps, and silence. The room froze. Hephaestion said only 3 words: "Clear the tent." The generals looked to the king. Alexander said nothing. They left, one by one, now just them. No war, no gods, no crown, just a man who erased the truth and the man he couldn't erase. Hephaestion didn't salute, didn't bow, didn't move close. "You've killed for less than silence," he said, "but mine has lasted longer than most men's lives." Alexander stared, hard, hollow, tired. "You disobeyed orders," he said. "I disobeyed your fear." Hephaestion stepped forward. "You let them erase my name, my face, my city, my memory. They burn statues and scrolls and bodies for saying I existed. And you let it happen." Alexander turned away. "You think this was easy. I think cowards have always preferred marble over mirrors." The pause was long. The tent pulsed with a silence thicker than blood. Then Hephaestion pulled something from his cloak. He placed it on the war table, a wax seal, broken, smeared in red, still warm. "You didn't order this, did you? But they still brought it to me." Alexander looked down, a head wrapped in cloth, the face barely recognizable except for the badge still pinned to its chest. A courier from the western depot, no letter, just the seal. Hephaestion whispered, "I send bread, you send warnings." Alexander's voice cracked. "I didn't know." Hephaestion cut him off. "You did nothing, that's worse." He turned to leave, but paused, didn't look back. "You rule the world, Alexander, but you'll never rule the memory of what you were to me. That's the one kingdom that won't kneel." And then he walked out. No guards stopped him. No one dared speak. And behind him, the king stood still, surrounded by maps of the world, yet unable to draw a line back to the only thing he'd never conquered. That night, Alexander ordered the floor of the tent scrubbed. Twice. He said nothing about the blood, said nothing at all. But in the morning, the guards found his hands stained with ink, and a page torn from the royal logbook. The name Hephaestion, written then scratched out, written again, then left untouched. No one called it justice. No one called it war, but people were dying. And every corpse whispered the same name, even if no one dared say it aloud. It began with the sculptor, old man, blind in one eye. He refused to melt down the last bust of Hephaestion, said it was a crime against shape. They took both his hands, laid them beside his carving bench like broken tools, then hung him upside down at the foundry gate. Alexander didn't order it. He didn't stop it either. Next came the boy, a child, 10, maybe 11. He had drawn a face in charcoal on a temple wall, sharp jaw, long hair, high cheekbones. The priest recognized it. That night the child's tent was torn down, his parents flogged, the wall painted over. The boy, gone. A scribe found crying by the river, a monk who'd hidden old letters under floorboards, a guard who muttered Hephaestion in his sleep. They disappeared, or they died, but all for the same crime, remembering. And Alexander, he no longer spoke during councils, no longer ate at banquets. He spent his nights in the war chamber, scratching ink into scrolls, then burning them. Over and over. One night, a servant found him asleep, head on the table, surrounded by torn paper. Each one bore the same word, Hephaestion. Written, scratched out, written again, burned. When asked for orders, he said, "Make the victories louder." But no one cheered anymore. The silence that once belonged to Hephaestion now belonged to everyone. No one dared speak freely. No one dared joke or toast or even remember their own past, because they might share a memory with him, and that was enough to bleed. A general whispered, "We've won the world," but lost the right to remember who we are. Alexander stared at his reflection in the water bowl that night, not because he liked what he saw, but because it was the only face left in the empire he was still allowed to look at. He tried to write the name one last time. It came out trembling. He didn't burn it. He folded it, buried it beneath his cot, and when he lay down that night, he whispered, "If I forget you again, let no one remember me." No one remembered what he died of. Some say fever, others poison, but most just say the last thing he wrote was a name. The body of Alexander was preserved in honey, not gold, not fire, honey, sticky, cold, sweet to the tongue. A king turned to syrup. And yet, even sealed in glass, even buried under pyramids of tribute, he still rotted. Not from the outside, from the memory. They buried him far from Hephaestion. The two men who built an empire were not allowed to share a grave. Even in death, they were separated by history's shame. But here, what no scribe could erase, the last page of Alexander's war log. It had no plan, no order, no signature, just one name, written once, no scratch-outs, no ink spilled, Hephaestion. Years later, a traveler found a cracked stone near the ruins of Hephaestion. No statue, no plaque, just a piece of marble half buried. Carved into it, "You were not my general, not my king, not my lover. You were the part of me I couldn't keep." And under that, no name, just a handprint pressed in blood. The empire crumbled, but the stories stayed. Not the ones in scrolls, the ones whispered, the ones said at night in firelight when people asked, "Why did the king lose himself?" And someone would always answer, "Because he forgot who made him human." History doesn't always kill with swords. Sometimes it kills by silence, by omission, by erasing a name from a map or a statue from a temple. But names, when spoken enough, survive, even after the kings who buried them are long gone. Now it's your turn. Do you think Alexander loved Hephaestion? Or do you believe he was just another shadow in the margins of a great man's story? Scroll down. Let me know what you believe. Was it loyalty, obsession, or the one kind of love an empire could never allow? Leave your thoughts below, because in the end, what we choose to remember is what becomes real.